The Small Business Committee will come to order, and I want to thank everyone for being here this morning. I know we have a vote that started 15 minutes ago, so my colleagues are on their way over, but I thought I'd go ahead and get started, and when Senator Risch arrives, we'll be certain to let him make his opening statement. The hearing this morning is on the President's fiscal year 2015 budget for the U.S. Small Business Administration, and I welcome our witness and first panel, Ms. Contreras-Sweet, who is the new SBA Administrator. Congratulations. She will present President Obama's budget request for the SBA overall. On the second panel, we will hear from Ms. Peggy Gustafson, who will present the budget request for the SBA's Office of Inspector General, and Dr. Winslow Sargent, who will present the budget request for SBA's Office of Advocacy. I would just say for members who aren't here, obviously, the record will be open for 2 weeks so that anybody who wants to make an opening statement about this President's budget request, we're happy to have those for the record. The President's overall request for the Small Business Administration for fiscal year 2015 is $865,710 million for the agency, combined with $155 million for the Disaster Loan Administration. Those levels represent a decrease of nearly $64 million, or 7% compared to fiscal year 2014 omnibus appropriations bill passed in January. Most of the decrease, though, is due to savings gained from the 504 Loan Guarantee Program. As the economy has improved and loans are performing better, they require less subsidies to offset those losses. On the whole, the President's budget request for small business is strong, and I agree with the majority of his requests. There are a few areas, though, where I believe we need to do more for small business, and I'd like to take a moment to discuss those today. But before I do that, I would also like to just mention the issue of disaster assistance. I think this is a very important role and a conversation that I look forward to discussing with the Administrator, and we already have had discussions. But as many people know, the state of Washington and the towns of Oso and Darrington along the banks of the Stillaguamish River was hit by a devastating mudslide 3 weeks ago. With no warning, the nearby hillside collapsed, burying in its path and taking the lives of more than 30 people. And Oso and Darrington and the nearby community of Arlington have seen major transportation impacts because the 530 corridor is a community in and of itself. So our hearts go out to those communities as we rebuild, and the long road of recovery is before us, and certainly to those families who've lost loved ones. I have been to Darrington several times, but we have been most recently with Homeland Secretary Johnson and Administrator Fugate to discuss the importance of bringing all available resources to the cleanup area and to help small businesses weather higher transportation costs, the impact of decreased business that are likely to last for months, if not years. The disaster is complicated on its own and deserves the best that government can offer, and so I certainly appreciate, Ms. Contreras-Sweet, thank you for your offer of help and support. Back to other issues. As I should just say it's not surprising that this is one of the top priorities for me, given what's just happened, but also within the SBA, I think disaster relief is a very critical aspect. So I know that we'll have a chance to discuss the disaster relief program. I know right now that SBA staffers have already deployed 3 disaster recovery centers and now are on the ground and operational there. So I support the President's request for an additional $155 million for disaster loan administration funds to support $1 billion in low-cost loans from homeowners, renters, and businesses of all sizes to help them recover from disasters in general. And certainly when we saw a collapse of the I-5 bridge and we had to have the help and impacts there, we certainly support disaster relief. So too often these disaster victims fall through the cracks and get caught between FEMA and SBA or the Department of Agriculture. So I want to make sure we continue to improve the service and coordination. In addition to agreeing to the President's budget request for SBA disaster loan, I applaud his request for reauthorization of the 504 Refinance Program that was created as part of the Small Business Jobs Act in 2010 that expired in 2012. This program has been successful in Washington and throughout the nation, And last June, this committee passed legislation unanimously that would restart the popular program, which the base of the 504 program is operating at zero subsidy. So consequently, I'm pleased that budget reflects that loans made through this 504 program are performing better. Given the good performance of the 504 loans and the lending volume from last year, I agree with the President's request of $7.5 billion for this loan program. So while I agree with the President on the 504 loan program, I do have a couple of differences on funding issues and objectives. To be more specific, I believe the 7A loan is growing and the demand for it. So I think we need to increase that authority. Some estimates are at least $19 billion from the current $17.5 billion. I'm also concerned about the drop in SBA lending to minorities, particularly African Americans and Latinos, so I want to talk about whether the fee waivers for small loans might help close the gap or make more doors and more opportunities if we do some targeting. And I hope that the Sba Objective is to increase the number of lenders targeting banks that are located in communities with large populations of African Americans, Native Americans, and Latinos. And so I don't think we could find a better person to help us with this challenge than you, Ms. Contreras-Sweet, because obviously you had founded a bank designed to help increase lending to Latinos, and so I'm sure that you can give us some strong input in this area. I also believe that we need the SBA, the focus on the Small Business Investment Corporation program to diversify in fund managers and more investments to small business owned by women and underrepresented populations. And I'm counting on the new leadership at SBA to develop a clear and transparent process to award licenses for SBIC programs so that everybody who is applying for those programs sees a clear and transparent process and understands exactly how those decisions are made. I agree with the President that a big part of this growing economy and creating jobs is expanding exports, particularly for small and medium-sized businesses. 95% of the world's consumers live outside of our borders, so exports are a huge economic opportunity as a worldwide middle class continues to expand. So I am disappointed that the budget does not request funding for the state trade and export promotion grants. With only 1% of small businesses exporting, the SBA should have resources devoted to these activities to help entrepreneurs, and I think the STEP program proved that it was very successful in this area, so certainly want to explore reinstating that program. Finally, but certainly not least, I look forward to hearing about the SBA's Office of Inspector General and SBA's Independent Office of Advocacy. I look forward to their testimony. We must reduce fraud and abuse and ensure that taxpayers are using dollars wisely. And recently, Winslow Sargent came in to share his work on the Office of Advocacy, so I look forward to your input on these issues. So again, thank you all for being here, and thank you for helping to make a big part of the U.S. economy, small business and job growth, a key focus. So I think what we will do is go ahead then and start with you, Ms. Contreras-Sweet, and have your opening statement, and then again, when Senator Risch comes, we'll allow him to make an opening statement and possibly by that time question. So again, congratulations. We're so glad you're in this position. We wish you were here sooner, but nonetheless, you're here, and so we'll make up for lost time. But thank you, and you're welcome to make an opening statement.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. And let me start with the 504 program. So there's a company in our state, the Schmidt Sheet Metal and Roofing Company. It's in Port Angeles out on the Olympic Peninsula. The company is owned by, it's been in the family business, and they are involved in heating and ventilation. So the 504 refinancing was able to help them refinance property debt that was constructed in 2008. And the refinancing loan reduced their interest rate and monthly payments for a savings of around $4,000 annually, which allowed them to help retain 4 jobs. So this is, an important part of our state because it's out on the Olympic Peninsula and hard to reach. So you want to keep businesses going there, and adding 4 employees is so important. So does the SBA General Counsel agree that the current version, if enacted, would give the SBA the flexibility to adjust fees, that it can operate at no cost to the taxpayers with no appropriation?
Thank you for asking me about the 504 refi, because I was delighted to see, again, this is my second day here before you, and so I'm delighted. I think we may be breaking a record here. But just back to your question, I think the 504 refi is an important element in lending. I think a lot of us understand that during the downturn, and for multitude of reasons, many small businesses have been challenged, and oftentimes they don't have the complete collateral, they don't have everything in place, so that the ability to be able to come into a bank and restructure their loan under the 504 refi, I think really makes a lot of sense, and I was delighted to see it happen. I know that there were some questions, as I mentioned to you before. We were delighted when it first came out, and then, we had to work through the rules. It was a little complicated for small businesses and for the banks alike to try to understand some of the elements in it, so that it took a little while to sort of get going. But then once it did, it was very well received. And so anyway, so I was delighted to see it back in the budget, and I'm here to share with you that from our point of view, I do understand that we think that we can set the fees as you described, so that we can continue to provide this program. Again, it's a complement to the rest of the initiatives that we have here underway, and I'm delighted to see it back in the budget. Thank you for that question.
Well, I just want to point out, I think it's true, maybe you could verify your perception, that the 504 refinance have performed better than expected. That is, making sure that we have the appropriate fees, so sufficient to cover any loss. And so that's just something moving forward. We want to make sure that we have an understanding that that's the right set amount, and that we're all comfortable that it performed well during this time period. So,
And I know that it's important to you that we not impact the taxpayers, and that you want this to be at zero subsidy. And so we're watching for that, and we want to assure you that that we will do whatever we need to do to make sure that this program works effectively out in the field and it's executed appropriately. Thank you for the question.
and I know on the STEP or the export program, expanding the SME, we have 2 U.S. Export Assistance Center in our state, Seattle and Spokane, and they provide a valuable resource. Can you make sure that these centers are fully staffed and are a priority for the SBA?
Again, thank you for addressing the issue of the importance, I should say, of having our small businesses be able to participate in a global economy. I think it's an important opportunity for our small businesses. As you aptly mentioned in your opening address, we are getting such a small piece of that opportunity, and why shouldn't our small businesses be able to do it with the evolution of technology and all the things that are available to them today? Access is easier than ever before. And so in that regard, I think that, the UZAS can play an important role, physically having somebody on the ground. And so while we have these offices now approved, I'm going to work to make sure that they're adequately and appropriately deployed with the appropriate geographical dispersion. So thank you for bringing that to our attention. It's something that I noted very early on, because I'm very concerned about small businesses and their ability to engage internationally, as I said. So I will study the deployment of the UZACs to make sure that we have them appropriately placed. Thank you for the question.
And what about the STEP program? It's not funded in the president's budget request, and as you mentioned, you're day 2 on the job, so I don't know.
Yeah.
I appreciate your focus on disaster assistance. So I guess what I would say is, if you have time to then now look at this STEP program and give some feedback to members of this committee about ways that program operated, or thoughts and ways to further assist businesses in this opportunity. The president has laid out this incredible export agenda, which I certainly believe in. 1 in 3 jobs in Washington State is related to trade, and we have huge economic opportunities for everything from airplanes to agriculture to software. So, we're all in, and I think California probably is too. But I think there are many small businesses that could see the benefit of that rising middle class around the globe. So very interested in your thoughts about ways to improve that, either with the STEP program or other ideas that you might have that would help small businesses.
Thank you. I appreciate the opportunity. Again, we have to find ways to make sure that our American small businesses are capturing their fair share of the international growth potential. Some economies are flattening, some are growing, and we need to make sure that we have a strategic plan to make sure that in those growing economies and even in the flat economies, where our vendors, where our small businesses can provide appropriate services, we ought to be able to find ways to empower them. I thought, as I mentioned the last time that we were here, that the STEP program was a very interesting program, at least for us in Los Angeles. I can share with you that our governor, the program works through the state offices, and our governor placed it within our UC system. So the chancellor is the one that's really executing. And so it went through, for example, in my community, it went through the UCLA system, and then they partnered up with our local Chamber of Commerce. And as I saw, Senator, as I saw that small businesses could come together first and be mentored about the opportunities that are available internationally, one. Two, as I saw that they were able to be introduced to networks of other people that they could team up with, because sometimes the opportunities are large and so they can't compete. But to the extent that we can pull them together, have them network, and to form an alliance so that they could go out and capture some of that work, that's very powerful. And then third, our chamber, for example, actually physically went out and made physical introductions in those countries. And so I found personally, at a personal level, I found the STEP program to be effective. And as I shared with you then, I thought that it was something that I wanted to understand and see, just assess. And so anyway, so I understand that right now what we're trying to do is just understand if that is exactly the right vehicle to use, or as you aptly point out, if there are other things that we could be doing. But certainly what I think the STEP program has done at the onset is it's engaged the states and supported the states and engaged the universities. Working closely with the other strategies that we have, the SBIR and the STTR, I think all, these three programs in particular can work very effectively together. So I will continue to assess it, and I'll come back to you very soon to sort of say, yes, I think this works, or this is the way we can refine it so that we can have something like it. Maybe it's through another core program that we already have, but I think that opportunity needs to be addressed. So thank you for your attention to it.
Okay, and then back to the disaster relief program. One of the things that we found with the I-5 bridge closure was exactly, how interdependent our community was on, transportation and business, particularly with Canada. We know that in general in the Northwest, but I think, as we recovered from the 2008 downturn, I think a lot of people, were trying to assess how much of that growth had happened with things that were occurring within the state and how much of it was the regional. But anyway, I-5, obviously a major corridor between U.S. and Canada. When that bridge went down, lots of businesses in and around that community were impacted. Or I guess I should say businesses all up and down the I-5 corridor that basically, people no longer planned trips.
Right.
Basically to Canada or from Canada were impacted. So in this case, I just want to make sure that that everybody understands that all those communities around, this is a much more geographically limited corridor, 530, but that the small business disaster assistance could go to anybody that's impacted from that community. It doesn't have to be right in the 530 corridor, but if you're a community that's impacted because that corridor is was maybe a 50-minute commute, now all of a sudden is a 3 or 4 hour commute, that businesses impacted as far away as Everett or Arlington might be able to apply for those funds. Is that correct?
Senator, first, thank you for that question again. Thank you. and you're talking to a transportation gal, and so I understand the impact of when the lifeline, the ability to get from one place to another, to connect with family, to continue to do commerce, all of those issues, when they're affected by our transportation systems and they fail, then you know, in this instance, I'm the administrator of the Small Business Administration, so I could talk to you about transportation systems, but I know that that's not what you're after here. So let me just say that when we heard that that happened in Darrington, we deployed, as you know, that we deployed our team right away. We were on the ground in 24 hours, as quickly as we could get out there. We were already pre-positioned in anticipation of the president's declaration, and as you and I talked and discussed publicly and privately, it's about getting the information out so people know what resources are available to them. We follow right behind FEMA, but as soon as FEMA was there doing the things that they do, as soon as they hit the ground, we needed to start getting on radio. We needed to start communicating, talking to local businesses about the 3 offerings. So first and foremost, we need to remind folks who live in homes that were affected that SBA does direct home lending. And so we've got to get that word out, and that's what our team is doing there today. As we speak, this is what they're doing. I said, get the word out. As I mentioned to you, it was the first thing that I did as soon as I took office was to go meet with this team. So we understand that. Secondly, to remind the businesses, however, that SBA is there for them too. Some folks just have physical damage that needs to be addressed, and so they need some funding for that. And some have economic loss, and so we need to remind them that that's also something that we can help them with. Because the road shut down, they may not have the throughway. They may not have the commerce that's usually taking place. They may not have, the visit, what we call, the deal flow or the customer flow. And so we want to make sure that they understand what we're capable of doing. And so we're doing everything that we can to get the word out, to give them the adequate information through our counseling centers, to the disaster team. And so all of the resources of the SBA are being brought to bear for this team. This is when we should shine the most. And so thank you for being sensitive to the fact that the Darrington Road highway was shut down. We're aware of it, we're watching it, and we're trying to do everything we can within the boundaries and the confines of this administration. Thank you.
Well, thank you for your quick response. We certainly appreciate SBA's support, and thank you for your interest in, keeping the team engaged. The president has announced that he's going to visit the area in the coming weeks, and so we very much appreciate that. I think it's on April 22nd, and certainly appreciate your support and interest there as well. I wanted to ask you, switching back now to the president's budget request on the 7A program. Obviously, there's been some discussion about what's the appropriate level. Is it accurate that SBA and OMB have reviewed raising the program level and found that a level of $19 billion would not mean having a would not have a cost, as it related to the taxpayers? So I know where they've come in on the request, but did they evaluate a higher level? And if not, we can get an answer from the team.
Right. Well, let me just, if you'll allow me just to address your question. Of all the things that we do, the 7A is probably what we're most known for. The 7A is a core lending product that we offer through financial institutions of all sorts. And so it is something that is, fundamental to the SBA, I guess is what I want to say. If I see that we're going to approach the current $17.5 billion ceiling that we're allowed, trust me, that would be a really good problem to have, because it says that we're doing our job and that we're accelerating the loans. And every time we issue a loan, it's another job created, right? This is about job creation. So we're tracking that very closely. And if we need to get to the $19 billion because we exceed this, I would fashion a response in short order, and it would continue to be at no cost to the taxpayer. We've assessed it, and we continue to operate within that authority, however. And again, I'm not here to ask you yet for the $19 billion, but in any case, it would not be at a cost to the taxpayer. Thank you for asking me that question.
Good. Well, I'm happy to hear you say that, because I think this is important because I think our committee is going to undertake some analysis of the access to capital problem as it relates to the downturn and where we are moving forward. I personally still have a great deal of concern that 50% of the assets in this country are owned by 5 banks, and that we have seen an actual decline in focus on small business activities when people can make more lucrative returns on some of these other derivative markets. So I have a concern overall that lending in general has gone a different direction at the very moment when the technology information age means thousands of flowers could bloom that previously weren't blooming. So to me, I think we want to see more access to capital. And it's not as if the SBA can't respond, but I'm almost asking you the question about meeting a goal. Wouldn't it be interesting if you were trying to fulfill that 19 number instead of 17, and what would the strategies be for executing on it? So I know you're saying that SBA responds to the needs of the community, but I'm looking at our economic opportunities as a nation and thinking, have we at the very moment where lots of new breakthroughs could happen, seen a shift in the access to capital, over the last 10 to 15 years that really has made it much more challenging for small business? But I'd love to hear any thoughts you have on that now, and then we'll get back, to you as our committee undertakes more information on this.
Well, you mentioned during your introduction, I felt years ago that we were not reaching everybody that deserved to be connected to access to capital. And so, as you know, I started a community bank to address the underserved. And so it is a top priority that I come with, just a life full of experiences. And I do think that we need to assess how technology, placement, now you can find a grocery store with a bank. So how do we connect with communities that have not typically thought of coming to the SBA, number one, and two, through what vehicles, what other channels through which can we reach them? And I think that's an important question. Let me just say this for now, and I do want to come back to you with a more thoughtful answer, but let me just say that, as I said at my opening remarks, inclusivity is something we have to consider. If we're going to lift this country, we're going to lift it because everybody's engaged, and so we need everybody in the game that is capable of being in the game, that wants to be in the game. And so to that extent, it's something that I addressed very early on when I first addressed the SBA team to talk about ways that we can be much more creative so that we can be more responsive. And what is it? The counseling centers, the 67 regional offices that we have, the resource partners, is it the financial institutions? And so I'm pleased that already people are reaching out to me because they know this is my history, that this is my legacy. And I was delighted that, I just let me assure you that already the financial institution is already understanding where I'm coming from, and they're coming forward and they're saying to me that they want to partner in new and expansive ways. And I want to come back to you with hopefully some success stories in that regard soon.
Well, good. We definitely are counting on it, and I don't know if one of the things that you're looking at is, smaller, loan, smaller loans, or waiving the fees and loans in general on smaller loans. But, to me, we have this explosion of micro lending happening around the globe.
Right.
You're getting, these banks are getting customers in the door that are then coming back for their second and third, expansions.
Right.
And, it brings into question what we're doing here on an economic basis too, to maybe create a different rung on the ladder. Maybe the services we're offering are starting at step 2 or 3, and we really need to have a step 1 to engage.
Right.
Some of these
It's an important, and if I may, just to follow up, what happens is that when you are in a bank and you are trying to get your units number to get your bonus, what you want to do is usually you want to lean towards the larger loans because you're going to do less documentation, and then and you're going to get your number a little faster. So we have to find ways to encourage all of the lenders to be incented somehow to do the smaller loans, the less than $150,000 loans. And so the fact that we were able to set it at zero, the fee structure at zero, already increased the lending by 14% in that first rung. So I think we now have strong evidence that that is one tool that we can use that's already working effectively. So we want to continue to, again, get the word out, work with our partners to find out what else that we can do to get them to engage and to work on that side of it. I'm going to be out. Our counseling centers are going to be encouraged and incented to be much more vocal in the communities that have been underserved. So again, I mean, I can just tell you that this is what I embody, and it's an important task for me personally, and I know for the administration. The president is also committed to it. So I'm delighted that you are too, and I know you are. And we will come back to you with some success stories. But already, just to say, to your point, that you're aptly focusing on the right part of this, the 0 to 150,000 is usually something that financial institutions want to shy away from. As soon as we set it at 0, we saw it go shoot straight up by 14%.
Great.
So we feel we can continue to do more of this. Thank you.
Great, thank you. So, Ms. Katurski, thank you so much for your testimony and answering these questions. Again, for the record, if my colleagues have statements or questions, we'll be sure to keep the record open for 2 weeks here, and we appreciate your help in answering anything that comes up from my colleagues. And so I think we'll turn to our second panel, and again, thank you for your willingness to take on this position, and we very much appreciate your dedication and experience to small business.
Thank you. If I may just, number one, first congratulate you once again, and thank you for stepping up and chairing this very important committee to America's small businesses, and also just to say that at this time when we are so threatened globally, it was another meeting that I took on my first full day was to meet with the veterans. And so I just wanted to share with you how important it is and that we mustn't forget them either. And so I was delighted to hear their stories, women, and somebody who just came home, as well as a growing, let's just say a more advanced veteran. And it was really a pleasure. It was very rewarding to hear their stories of how the SBA has helped and changed, transformed their lives. And so it's reassuring, and I want to extend that to you, to say to you that SBA is affecting and changing people's lives in imaginable ways. Thank you very much for your vote of confidence.
Well, thank you for mentioning the veterans, and we too are very concerned and interested in that, and part of it, I think our challenge is just communication, and I think you're a very strong communicator and advocate for the SBA, so hopefully you can bring a lot of awareness to these issues and to the opportunities that people have working through these loan mechanisms. Thank you.
Thank you.